I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth. Let's get into it. Before I take you into this one, hold on to a simple rule. When somebody greets your return with police instead of conversation, do not argue your character on the porch. Ask for counsel. Save every record, and let the truth stay boring. In this story, the biggest red flag was not the handcuffs. It was how calm she looked before they clicked. I came home from deployment on a damp March afternoon with a duffel bag biting into my shoulder and salt still crusted on my boots from the airport parking garage. Milwaukee looked half awake. Gray sky hanging low over the blocks, bus brakes hissing at corners, old snow shrinking into black slush along the curb. I had spent 10 months telling myself that the first real breath would come when I opened my front door. My wife, Nia, texted an hour earlier that she could not make it to the terminal because she was handling something at home. I believed her because belief is what a husband does when he is tired and hopeful at the same time. If you like intense betrayal stories, cheating wife karma stories, and relationship drama with real consequences, stay with me because this one gets deeper with every reveal. And before we get into it, like this video, share with somebody who loves dramatic story time, and subscribe for more first-person stories about betrayal, lies, and karma. The house sat in Sherman Park exactly where I left it. Brick duplex, white storm door, 2 cedar planters I built the summer before deployment. One of the planters was dead, the other full of stiff brown stems, and that should have told me something, because Nia babied plants the way some people baby old photographs. She labeled spice jars, folded fitted sheets like a contest judge, sprayed linen mist on sofa pillows every Sunday evening. I took my key out, turned the lock, and stepped into my own front hall. 2 police officers were waiting in the living room. Nia stood behind them in a cream cardigan. One hand pressed her throat. She looked at me, not with relief, not even with guilt. She lifted her chin and said, "That's him." I remember the click of the cuffs better than I remember my own answer. Maybe because metal is honest. Metal does not pretend. One officer told me to turn around, and training took over before emotion could. I put my hands behind my back. I did not shout. I did not step toward her. I did not ask the question pulsing through my throat, which was why. The younger officer read from a folded paper and said the words temporary protective order. Nia kept her eyes on the floor, but I could feel performance in the room. It had rehearsal all over it. My duffel bag sat on the entry rug beside the umbrella stand, still zipped like I had dropped my old life there by accident. At the station, they took my laces, my belt, my wallet, and every shred of normal pride I had packed for the flight home. The detective asked whether I had threatened my wife while deployed. I said no the first time, no the second time, and then I stopped trying to sound offended because offense is not evidence. Around midnight, they released me with a date for a hearing and instructions not to return home, contact Nia, or so much as pass our block without risking another arrest. Malcolm, my older brother, was waiting outside in his city mechanic jacket, grease still dark under one thumbnail. He drove me to his bungalow near Hampton Avenue, without music, on his couch, under a crochet blanket our mother had made before she died. I stared at the ceiling fan and decided I would not scream. I would document. Before all of this, Nia and I were the kind of couple people pointed at during church anniversaries. We were both black kids from Milwaukee who had grown up fast, worked hard, and wanted a house with decent light, and a porch big enough for family on summer evenings. She worked front desk at a dental practice in Wauwatosa and kept legal pads in 3 colors. I was a National Guard staff sergeant and a civil engineer in the private sector when I was stateside. My one odd habit was restoring old radios from estate sales. Hers was writing grocery lists in perfect block letters and taping them inside cabinet doors. On first Sunday, she baked sweet potato pound cakes for her aunties. On Fridays, I fried catfish in the backyard because she hated the smell indoors. Ordinary life can look sturdy right up until it cracks. The first 4 months of deployment, she called like clockwork. Sunday morning for me, Saturday nights for her. She would prop the phone near the kitchen window, and I would watch steam rise from a mug while she told me about the church women's retreat, a cracked tile in the bathroom, a patient who flirted too hard with a hygienist. Sometimes she would turn the phone, so I could see our houseplants or the old red radio I had nearly finished restoring on the dining table. She made me feel present in my own life from an ocean away. Looking back now, I hate how much comfort there was in those calls. It makes the later parts harder to sort because betrayal did not begin cold. It began wrapped in familiar things. The shift was small enough to excuse at first. She started missing Sunday calls and blaming overtime. When she did answer, she sat in her car instead of the kitchen, saying the internet was better there. Once I heard a man laugh somewhere near her, and she said it was a neighbor's television through an open window. Another time, she told me our back gate had jammed, and a contractor from church gave her a recommendation for repairs. "Terrence Boone," she said, flipping through one of her yellow legal pads. "He does decent work." I remember the name because she repeated it twice, like she wanted to sound harmless before I could wonder whether it was. The morning after my arrest, Malcolm made me eggs I could barely swallow and took me to Dana Mercer's office downtown. Dana was one of those women who did not waste words because she did not need to. Black women in her 40s, close-cropped hair, navy suits, an old Army Reserve plaque on the bookshelf behind her desk. Her office smelled like coffee and paper and the kind of hand lotion older professionals use when they wash their hands too often. She let me talk without interruption, from the airport to the cuffs to the detective's questions. When I finished, she slid a legal pad toward herself and said, "We start with what can be proven, not what hurts. What can be proven." That mattered because Malcolm had a different plan. Halfway to Dana's office, he had gripped the steering wheel and said, "Say the word, and I'll go have a conversation." I knew exactly what kind of conversation he meant, and for 5 ugly seconds it sounded satisfying. Terrence, Nia, the whole stage mess. Part of me wanted somebody to feel my confusion in their teeth. I said no, because I'd already spent one night watching how easy it was for a lie to become paperwork. I was not going to hand them a real reason to fear me. That was the first fork in the road, and I took the slower one on purpose. I chose counsel over catharsis because I wanted my name back more than I wanted a dramatic moment. Dana requested the affidavit Nia had used with protective order. By noon, she had a copy on her desk. Nia claimed I had sent threatening messages during deployment from a number the affidavit linked to, then that I arrived home agitated, pounded on the front door, and made her fear immediate harm. "Read the language," Dana said, tapping the page. "It is neat. Too neat." The screenshots attached showed text in cropped boxes with no provider stamp, no full thread, just dramatic lines meant to make a judge move quickly. The number looked almost like one I used for work through a voice app, except 2 digits were switched. It was close enough to mislead, clean enough to feel manufactured. On the drive back to Malcolm's, something surfaced in my head, so suddenly I asked him to turn around at a stoplight. Before deployment, I had installed a basic camera system tied to an old laptop and a smart lock on the side door because Nia said being alone at night made her uneasy. Front porch camera, driveway camera, detached garage camera, nothing fancy. I also remembered the little home speaker in our kitchen, the one she used for gospel playlists, timers, and weather updates. At Malcolm's basement workbench, between his train magazines and socket sets, we found my backup laptop in a canvas tote bag. Dust had settled on it like time. When it was powered on and the camera archive loaded, my stomach tightened so hard I had to sit down. The first thing I saw was not the affair. It was the day of my return. Porch view, time-stamped. 2 officers arrived 19 minutes before I got home. Nia opened the door in house shoes and a long cardigan. No panic in her body at all. She even stepped outside once, looked down the block, and smoothed her hair in reflection of the storm door glass. Terrence's black pickup rolled slowly through the alley behind our garage 4 minutes later. He did not park in front. He waited where the driveway camera could catch the rear quarter panel if you knew what to look for. By the time I opened the front door of my footage, everybody was already placed where they needed to be. Then I checked the earlier weeks. There he was again. Terrence came through the side gate at 8:42 p.m. on a Tuesday, then 11:13 p.m. on a Saturday, then just after 1 in the morning on a rainy Thursday with his jacket over his head. Sometimes he used a side door code. Sometimes Nia opened for him before he even knocked. In one clip, she wore the yellow robe I bought her our second Christmas together, the one with the torn belt loop she never remembered to fix. I did not know why that detail hit me harder than his face. Maybe because infidelity is terrible in the abstract, but it becomes personal when it borrows from your ordinary life. Malcolm stood over my shoulder in silence while I copied files to 3 flash drives and 1 secure folder Dana gave me. I named everything by date and camera angle. Porch, driveway, garage, mechanical work. That was how I kept myself from flying apart. I thought about calling Nia right then from a block number just to hear how she would sound when she lied, but I stopped. That was another decision that could have gone another way. I did not reach for her because I knew the most dangerous thing about manipulative people is how quickly they turn your reaction into a fresh exhibit. I gave Dana the footage instead. She watched for 20 minutes, then said, "Good, now we build." 2 days later, Dana arranged a civil standby so I could retrieve uniforms, medication, and work files in the house without violating the order. A sheriff's deputy met us on the sidewalk, while wet flakes drifted out of a low sky. The place smelled like Nia's cinnamon linen spray over something masculine, and sharp I did not recognize. My framed deployment photo had been taken off the hallway table. The red Zenith radio I restored was gone from the dining room. In the kitchen, one of her yellow legal pads sat open near the fruit bowl. 3 columns written in her careful block letters. Refinance, sale timing, equity split. She had circled the word occupancy twice. I folded that page and handed it to Dana without saying a word. Dana later called for an attorney meeting at the house because Nia's lawyer wanted to discuss temporary arrangements. That phrase almost made me laugh. Nothing about this felt temporary. Nia came in wearing a soft gray turtleneck and small pearl studs, the exact face of wounded respectability. Terrence followed in a camel coat, carrying himself like a man who believed his smile still worked on strangers. He tapped 2 fingers on the back of her chair like he was calming a horse. "I was helping with repairs," he said before anyone asked. She needed support. Nia folded her hands, inhaled, and said, "Josiah came home different. I did what I had to do." I sat across from her at the oak table we once picked out together and realized how much of her softness had always been strategic. Dana did not pounce. She let them talk until their story began to harden. Then she placed still images from the porch camera in a row, officers arriving early, Nia opening the door calmly, Terrence's truck in the alley before I reached home. Terrence's jaw shifted. Nia blinked twice and then said the line she must have prepared for this exact moment. I called him because I was scared. Dana slid over 3 more stills, this time late night. Entries through the side gate. Scared people do not usually give house codes to men they are asking for protection from, she said. It was a good hit, but not enough for a knockout. Nia adapted quickly. She said Terrence had become her emergency contact because I was gone and the house needed work. The lie bent, but it did not break yet. The next break came from a forensic phone consultant Dana used named Laverne Pike. Laverne wore oversized tortoiseshell glasses and spoke in a low, patient voice that made technical things sound like gossip she was generous enough to share. She looked at Nia's screenshot exhibits for less than 10 minutes before pointing to uneven margins, inconsistent font rendering, and clipped contact bubbles. "These were assembled," she said. Then she subpoenaed my carrier logs and the provider tied to the spoof number. No messages from me. No account in my name. The number had been created through a burner app 2 weeks before my flight home using a prepaid card purchased at a corner pharmacy less than a mile from our house. Every new fact made me colder. I had married a woman who did not merely lie. She prepared. At the first hearing, the judge studied the affidavit, then Laverne's report, then the carrier logs. Nia's attorney tried to pivot into emotional language about deployment stress and fear in the home. Dana did not rise to the bait. She stayed with timestamps and call records until the judge dissolved the initial protective order for lack of credible supporting evidence. It was not a triumph. It was a small legal correction. Still, breathing felt easier outside the courtroom than it had in days. Nia passed me near the elevator in her wool coat, close enough that I caught the cinnamon gum she always chewed before saying something unpleasant. Without looking fully at me, she said, "You still are not keeping that house." That was when the real shape of her plan came into focus. Back at Dana's office, she asked whether I wanted to push for a quick divorce settlement now that the order was gone. "We can sometimes buy peace," she said. I leaned back in my chair and thought about the yellow legal pad, the fake texts, the officer's place in my living room before I even parked. Buying peace would have meant handing her the very thing all this seemed designed to secure. So I made the third big decision of this mess. I refused a fast exit. I asked Dana to audit everything: mortgage, bank accounts, insurance, home equity, credit pulls, all of it. I did it because Nia's threat outside that courtroom sounded less like heartbreak and more like a timetable. Dana brought in a forensic accountant named Amari Sykes, a broad-shouldered man with a soft voice and a habit of tapping his pencil against his thumb when numbers irritated him. Within a week, he found a second checking account open 6 months into my deployment. Nia had linked it to a home renovation line of credit and moved money from our joint savings in increments small enough not to trigger automatic alerts. "Not random," Amari said, turning the statement so I could see the pattern. Then he laid out invoices from Terrence's LLC, Blue Birch Renovations, backgate replacement, attic moisture repair, garage security upgrade, emergency plumbing, all billed during months when the cameras showed no crews and no materials. The man she called support had been on payroll. One fake invoice hit me harder than the others. In August, during a bad storm off the lake, Nia called and said water was seeping into the upstairs back room. She sounded frazzled, sent one blurry picture of stain, and asked if she should just let Terrence handle it, because she was overwhelmed. I wired extra money that same night for my deployment savings. I remember sitting on my bunk staring at the transfer confirmation and feeling good that I could still protect home from far away. Amari pointed to the invoice date, then to our weather records. No major storm damage report for our block. No insurance inquiry. I laughed once, dry and ugly, because there is a humiliation unique to discovering your love had a budget attached to it. Rumors move faster than filings. By the second Sunday after the first hearing, Aunt Bernice called to tell me women in the church prayer circle had heard I came back troubled and unpredictable. Malcolm wanted me to stand up after service and say something sharp enough to stop the whispering. I almost did. I was angry about it. Instead, I met Pastor Coleman in his office before Wednesday Bible study. Old radiator ticking, peppermint tea on his desk, choir practice thumping faintly through the wall. I showed him the dissolution order and asked only one thing: do not let my pain become a church hobby. He nodded, embarrassed and sincere. That choice saved me more than I understood then. Public defense would have fed the spectacle. Private boundaries starved it. Pastor Coleman also handed me something useful, without meaning to. Terrence had been bidding on repairs for Fellowship Hall all winter, and Nia had volunteered to help coordinate since she was good with paperwork. There were sign-in sheets from multiple late evening budget meetings, many ending long after the church office closed. Then, on a cold Saturday when I went to Len's barbershop for the first time since coming home, Len draped the cape around me, met my eyes in the mirror, and said, "I do not traffic in gossip, but I saw Boone's truck on your block enough times that I started thinking he had moved in. The shop smelled like talc and aftershave and hot clippers, ordinary male comfort." I sat in that chair and understood how public my private life had become. During another supervised retrieval at the house, I found a storage box in the coat closet that Nia had not bothered to clear out. Inside were mortgage statements, a packet from a remote notary service, and copies of my driver's license that I had never sent anyone. One cover sheet had our equity estimate highlighted in pink. Another had a sticky note in her handwriting: after occupancy ruling, list by June. I stood there in my own hallway holding evidence that my marriage had become a project plan. The deputy gave me a look like he wanted to pretend he had not seen my face change. I handed the whole packet to Dana. She said, "Now we know the motive. We still need the mechanism." The mechanism arrived because of a kitchen gadget I almost forgot existed. Our little smart speaker sat on the counter between the flour canister and the recipe stand, and Nia used it for everything: setting timers, making shopping lists, asking for weather, replaying old Anita Baker songs while she wiped surfaces that were already clean. Since it was on our shared home account, Some command histories sync to the same cloud dashboard as the cameras. Dana subpoenaed the archive. At first it looked useless. Weather questions, devotionals, reminder chimes. Then Laverne found voice snippets attached to manual reminders. One clip from the day I came home was less than 8 seconds. Nia's voice, calm as afternoon tea, saying, "Remind me, officers at 4:30 moved Terry's truck to the alley." I closed my eyes when I heard it. Planning had a sound after all. There was another clip 3 days earlier. No direct confession, nothing that neat. Just Nia in the kitchen, probably speaking too close to the device while making coffee. "No, not from his real number," she said. "It has to look close enough." Then a pause. Then, "Do not overdo it. Judges believe fear, not theater." The room at Dana's office went still when Laverne played it. Malcolm swore under his breath. Dana did not. She only asked Laverne to verify metadata twice and preserve the chain of custody. That was when I realized the difference between anger and strategy in a serious room. Anger wants the satisfaction of being right. Strategy wants admissible proof. Nia did what manipulative people do when they feel the ground shift. She escalated, instead of another abuse claim. She filed an emergency motion for exclusive use of the house and temporary support, arguing that my volatile return made co-ownership impossible and that she needed immediate control to prevent financial uncertainty. Dana almost smiled when she read it. "Good," she said. "Now she has to talk under oath about the money." I was too tired to smile. I was sleeping badly, grinding my teeth, waking before dawn on Malcolm's couch every time a siren moved through the neighborhood. But exhaustion can sharpen a man, too. I ironed a shirt, drank burnt coffee from Malcolm's chipped mug, and showed up for every meeting with the same flat intention. Let her keep talking. In deposition, Nia tried to perform calm and righteous at the same time. She said Terrence was a contractor, nothing more. She said the second account existed because she needed privacy while I was away. She said the loan paperwork contained my approval, verbal if not written. When Dana asked why the smart speaker reminded her about police timing on the day of my arrival, Nia blinked and said she no longer remembered. Dana let that answer sit there. Then she walked through the fake invoice list, one by one, and asked what exactly had been repaired. The attic moisture job, the emergency plumbing, the side gate replacement. Nia fumbled details because she had never expected to need them. Lies like broad strokes. Real life demands receipts. Terrence was deposed separately, and for the first hour, he carried himself like a man who still thought charisma was a legal defense. He wore a fitted brown suit, expensive watch, an expression of somebody accustomed to being considered useful in church basements and city permit offices. Dana asked about Blue Birch renovations. He said he did consultative property support, which sounded like nonsense dress and business casual. Then she played the voice clip about moving his truck to the alley. He shifted. When Amari plays side-by-side comparisons of invoice dates and camera footage showing no crews, no ladders, no supplies, Terrence's answers started shortening. By the time Dana asked who drafted the emergency repair estimates, he had loosened his tie twice and stopped meeting anyone's eyes. The remote notary problem cracked next. Dana traced the service Nia used to open the home equity line and requested the verification packet. The image uploaded as my identification had been scanned from an old copy I kept in the coat closet. The facial verification call was missing because the notary had accepted a connectivity issue exception and processed the paperwork anyway. That might have stayed a dry technicality, if not for the dental office. One subpoena later, Dana learned Nia had used her work scanner and company email to send the documents during office hours. A receptionist at another desk remembered it because Nia had snapped at anyone who walked too close while she was doing it. Consequences rarely arrive like thunder. Most times they appear because somebody careless assumed ordinary workers would forget what they saw. We went into mediation in April, and the room felt like every fluorescent hallway in America. Too cold, too beige, coffee cooked past mercy. Nia wore a powder blue blouse and a thin gold cross at her throat. Terrence looked drained now, the edges of his confidence turning papery. The retired judge serving as mediator asked for summaries. Dana gave ours without adjectives. Staged police presence, fabricated messages, false financial transfers, forged loan documents, fraudulent contractor invoices, voice recordings corroborating advanced coordination. Nia's attorney tried to reframe the whole thing as a collapsing marriage full of misunderstandings and poor boundaries. Malcolm sat behind me, silent and furious. I kept my hands folded because I wanted them to see the same thing every time they looked at me, a man whose story had not changed once. Dana saved the smart speaker clips for the point when the room got tired enough to cut corners. She always understood timing better than volume. First, she played Nia, reminding herself to move Terrence's truck because officers would arrive at 4:30. Then the close enough clip about using a number that only looked like mine. No drama, just Nia's own voice flattening the distance between suspicion and proof. The mediator took off his glasses. Nia stared at the wood grain of the table like she might disappear through it. Terrence's lawyer rubbed a hand over his mouth. I expected some last theatrical denial from Nia. Instead, she whispered, "That is out of context." It was the weakest thing she had said the whole time, which is how I knew the truth had finally reached her bones. Terrence broke first, though not all at once. He tried to save himself by shaving blame. Nia told him I was controlling. She claimed I had agreed to refinance after deployment, said he never thought the police piece would go that far. Then Dana slid over the fake invoice packet with his signature blocks, the payments routed into his business account, and the camera still showing him enter my property at midnight on dates he billed for emergency labor. "You do not need to help us," she told him. "The documents all ready. Do. You only need to decide how deep you plan to sink with her." It was the first time I saw genuine fear on his face. Not fear of me, fear of paper. The final hearing came 6 weeks later in family court, and by then the case had become less about hurt feelings and about fraud and dissolution. The judge was a middle-aged black woman with silver at her temples, and a voice so measured it made everybody else sound sloppy. She listened to Dana for nearly an hour without interruption. Dana walked her through the staged homecoming, the spoof messages, the voice archives, the second account, the forged loan, and the fake repair bills. Nia's attorney tried to argue that marriages are messy and that people under emotional strain make bad financial choices. The judge did not bite. "Messy is not the same as fabricated," she said, and the room changed shape around that sentence. Nia testified because she still believed somewhere deep down that presentation could rescue her. She spoke softly. She dabbed one eye with a tissue she never really needed. She called Terrence a friend, then a contractor, then somebody who had blurred lines during a difficult season. Dana never raised her own voice. She only placed contradictions beside each other until Nia had to choose which version to abandon. Why remind yourself about officers if you were in spontaneous fear? Why open a second account if you only want to help with repairs? Why use a scanned copy of my identification from the coat closet if I had approved the loan? By the end, Nia was no longer gliding. She was chopping through her own statements, trying to keep one lie alive by sacrificing another. The ruling came a week later. The judge awarded me the house and assigned the fraudulent home equity debt to Nia pending separate review. She granted the divorce on grounds that included financial misconduct and intentional misrepresentation, ordered attorney's fees and restitution for the diverted funds, and formally referred the false reporting and document issues to the district attorney's office for evaluation. That was the moment people would probably expect me to feel victorious. I did not. I felt steady. There is a difference. Victory is hot. Steadiness is cool and almost quiet. I walked out with a folder under my arm and Malcolm beside me, and for the first time since deployment, I believed the ground beneath me might stop moving. Consequences kept arriving after the court date, not dramatically, just relentlessly. Nia lost her job at the dental office when the owner learned she had used company equipment and emailed for unauthorized legal documents after being subpoenaed himself. Terrence's business was removed from a city-approved contractor list while the invoice issues were reviewed, and several church members quietly stopped recommending him once the hearing records circulated. I did not organize any of that. I did not need to. People imagine accountability requires spectacle. Often it is simply the long tail of verified facts reaching every place a lie once touched. Nia moved into her sister's apartment on the north side. Terrence sold his pickup by summer. Neither detail made me happy. Both made the world feel less crooked. Getting the house back was stranger than losing it. I unlocked the door with a new key and stood in the entryway for nearly a minute because memory had waited there. The welcome mat was gone. My duffel was long unpacked. The cedar planter boxes still needed new soil. Inside, the rooms carried traces of Nia's systems, labeled pantry bins, folded throw blankets. The little glass jar clothespin she insisted looked tidier than a plastic bag. I changed every lock, reset every code, canceled every link device, and boxed up anything that felt loaded enough to make breathing harder. Then I opened all the windows, even though the air still had spring chill in it. I wanted the house to smell like outside again. One evening, Malcolm came over with paint rollers, fried perch from a carryout on Center Street, and exactly one question. We stood in the living room in old clothes, primer drying on the walls where Nia had once insisted on a color called soft wheat. He asked, "You good?" It was such an insufficient phrase for what he meant that I laughed. "No," I said, "but I am not poisoned." He nodded like that was enough. We ate fish out of paper trays on the floor and listened to Mr. Holloway 3 houses over practicing trumpet scales on his back porch, the same way he had every summer for years. Small neighborhood sounds returned before peace did. Sometimes that is how healing enters, through ordinary noise reclaiming the space where chaos was loud. I found our wedding album in the hall closet while clearing shelves. I expected rage when I opened it. What I felt instead was grief, so plain it almost embarrassed me. There we were under church basement lights, smiling too hard, my hand at her waist, her veil slipping a little on one side because she had pinned in a hurry. I sat on the steps with that album in my lap and understood that the marriage I was mourning had not existed in the form I believed. Parts of it were real, parts were aspiration, parts were performed on both sides. I had loved the version of us that fit my loyalty. She had loved the version of me that could be managed. That is not the same thing as partnership. By June, I had tomatoes growing in fresh soil in the cedar planters and the old red Zenith radio humming in the dining room again after I replaced a brittle capacitor. I went back to church, though I sat near the rear doors for a while because I was not interested in becoming anybody's sermon example. Aunt Bernice hugged me too tightly and did not apologize outright, but she brought peach cobbler by the next Sunday, which in our family counts as repentance. At Len's barbershop, nobody asked nosy questions anymore. Men only nodded in maid room. I learned to sleep through sirens again. Not every night. Enough of them. That counted. When people hear the outline of what happened, they want the end to sound colder than it really was. They want me to say I destroyed her, buried them both, made sure they suffered. That is not what happened. I made sure the record was complete. I made sure every lie had to stand next to a document, a timestamp, a voice clip, a transfer log, a forged signature, and a truck moved to the alley before officers arrived. She paid in the way people actually pay when they gamble with the truth too long. Money, reputation, employment, credibility, and a home she tried to steal by turning my return into a trap. I did not win by becoming cruel. I won by staying measurable. If you made it to the end, then you know this was never just a cheating wife story. It was a false accusation, betrayal, and karma story about what happens when lies finally meet proof. Like this video. Share it with someone who loves powerful relationship drama, and subscribe for more original first-person stories where secrets unravel and the truth hits back. The parts worth remembering are not the loudest ones. It is the porch camera showing officers already inside the scene, the yellow legal pad with equity split circled twice, and that absurd little kitchen speaker calmly preserving the truth while everybody else performed. Boundaries are not bitterness. They are what keep grief from turning into self-destruction. When someone tries to rewrite you, stay exact. Exactness outlasts theater. The end.